Hello, this is Logan Murphy, and for this video we're going to be selecting multiple things using MySQL. So we're going to start by using MySQL Workbench, and for this video we're going to be printing on the index page. We're going to print all of the categories and films in that category. So in MySQL we have a table called the category table, which just has all the categories in the database. So this is actually a pretty simple query, and all we want from this table is the name. Okay, and we can execute that, and that just gets a list of the category name. Sorry. So it's very simple. Instead of doing all this stuff in the index, we're going to start PHP code. We're going to connect to the database. For arguments, the server name, which is ourselves, username, password, and the database is Sequila. First things first, let's get the table using this database. We're going to use that query we just used, so we'll get the table first. If we actually got a table, then we're going to see if there is a row in that table. Actually, we're going to see while there's a row in that table. We're going to fetch from that table. So every time we do this loop, every time we enter this loop, we'll get the next row from the table. While there are rows to get, pretty much is what this say. While there are rows to get them. Okay? And we're just gonna have we're just gonna make this array called categories. So the row that we get here, or actually the table that we get from here, is similar to this table. Similar to this table, and each row, this is a row, this is a row, this is a row, this is a row. So this function will, this while loop will loop, I think it was 12 times. And we're getting the name column with a lowercase n. That's what it says here, name. And we're just going to push the name of each category onto this array called categories. So when I just have this empty box here, it means put it at the top of this array. In case you're confused, categories is an array. This line of code is optional. I prefer not to do it, but just so you're aware, categories is an array we can put onto the top of this array by not specifying an index. This says put it on the top. So put each category name on the top of the array categories. And then we will free the table. So far we're just getting every category. We have not printed a single thing. And you can see that here. Nothing's here. So the container has this line, these few lines of code, and these few lines of code right now. That's why there's so much white space. It's because I put so much white space here. Now, we don't have to keep opening and closing PHP here. We can just put it all in one PHP code block. It's fine. So now there won't be any spaces. See? Well, actually, the space that's right there is actually in the template right now. I guess it's in the header or the footer. Yeah. So the space that's right there is the space that's right there. It's just a tab and a space, which is a tab and a space, or 2 tabs. Whatever. That's why there's space there right now. Could put a new line, save it, refresh it, just so that it's not as weird looking. Okay. So we need to let's look at all the categories again, except this time we'll be printing them. So we need to create a variable that tells us where we are in the array. So this is what index in the array are we. And we want to make sure that the index that we are in the array is less than the number of things in the array, categories. And make sure we move on to the next thing. And we're just going to echo the div, which is going to be title, I think it was. I'm going to echo this. We're going to echo categories at the index that we are at. Okay, so we'll echo an opening div tag with the class title, which will give us that really big bold text with a underline, and then we'll print the category name, because that's what's stored in this array, a bunch of category names, and then we'll print the closing div, and then we'll increase I. So let's see. Okay, so we have all of our category names, and they're in alphabetical order. Okay. So we also need to print the films in that category. So for each category, each index of this category array, we need to print the films of that category. So we need to go to MySQL Workbench and try to make a test query. So we want to select, and just for now, because we don't know what we want to select exactly, let's select every column from the table film. I have the wrong database selected. Okay. And you want to know what films are of a certain category. So we actually need to do join on these 2 tables. And it's called an inner join on a category or a film category table. Just format this a little bit. Now the way I format MySQL is not official, just what I do. And you need to say what you're joining it on. film.filmID equals film category dot film ID. So how did I know what does all this stuff do? That's probably what you're wondering. So when you initially downloaded Sequila, it came with this EER, and it showed you all these relationships between these tables. Each of these connections is a relationship between the table, which pretty much says that, for example, a customer has an address. Customer has an address. Okay. So his address it's just an ID. It's an ID into this table. So in order to find out where a customer lives, let's say the customer's ID is 1. The address ID here is 1. That means you need to look inside of the address table and see which entry in this table has a address ID 1, because that's the address of this customer. So to see an actual example, go to the customer table, select 1000, and we'll look at Linda Williams, and his address, or her address ID is 7. Okay, so that means that we need to look at the address table and look for number 7. So this is where Linda lives. 692 Joliet Street, Attica, city, zip. And once again, this is a city ID. So this is just a number. This isn't actually a city. If you wanted to know what city this was, we would need to look at the city table. So the city ID was 38. So if you wanted to know where Attica was and 692 Joliet Street was, we look at the city, which is 38. Scroll down to the 38. And Athena, I guess. That's how you pronounce it. And then there's the country ID. So if you want to know where Athena is, gotta go to the country table now. And the country ID is 39, which is Greece. Okay. So we're joining these two tables on that relationship. So if I hover over this, actually, let's look at what we're actually interested in. If I hover over film, you see that film ID in this table turns blue, and film ID in this table turns blue. That's because there's a relationship between this film ID and this film ID. Okay. So we want to see where those film IDs are equal, like I was doing just now. I looked for customer, I looked for 7 in the address. After I found 7 in the address, I found 38 in the city. After I found 38 in the city, I find 39 in the country. And after I find 39 in the country, I'm pretty much done finding out where the customer lives. Similar to this. I'm going to select the film categories. Do I have it open? So film categories, so I'm going to look for film ID 1. Let me close some of this. So I'm going to look at all these film categories. Do I need this? I don't need that either. Don't need that either. Go through all these film categories. So film number 1, let's look at the film table. So Academy Dinosaur, their category is 6. So let's look at the category. So there's a category ID, so that means we should look at the category table. And category 6 is documentary. So Academy Dinosaur is a documentary. Okay, hopefully you've heard of Ace, or actually, nope, I don't know what that is. see if I can find a movie that I definitely know the category of. I'm probably never going to have heard these. See if R is here, because I might know an R movie that's in here. Okay. Well, you could look through this database, you could look through these tables, look for a movie that you actually know. Then look in the film category table, look for that film ID, and you can find out what category it's in, and you can verify what category it's in. So films can actually have multiple categories. I don't know if there's any examples in this database, but there could potentially be a film that has multiple categories. Like it could be a comedy action, but I'm not going to look through everything. So pretty much I'm making sure that the film category table, that the film that is that is important to it, the only film that's important to it is the film ID that's in this row, or in this row, or in this row. So, and I'm going to get the film that it's actually important, and both of the columns. And these names are just, once you look at a database, you should just know, if you see word underscore ID, that's the table, a table name, and that's a table's ID. So if I see film underscore ID, that means that this is the film ID, the film table's ID column. And since we're in the film table right now, this is this table's ID. If I scroll over and see language ID, well, there must be a language table. There just must be. It's just an assumption I make because it's just how databases are designed. So lo and behold, there is a language table, and there is an ID number 1, and that's English. So that means that this film is in English. And any other IDs? There's no other IDs in this table, but there are IDs all over the place. As you can see here, there's IDs all over the place. Every single relationship here has a relationship between 2 IDs, and you can verify that. Anything that turns blue, green, yellow, whatever color, it'll be something underscore ID, a table name underscore ID. Whether it's this table name or another table name, it's table name underscore ID. And you want to join on the relationship. Join on the relationship. That's really all I can say. This is the relationship, and I'm joining on that. I'm joining on that relationship. Okay. Wow. Let's move on. We're going to need a variable, which is the category name. I actually decided I want to do something. I want to add something here. So instead of storing just the name, we'll store the entire row in this category, and we're also going to fetch the category ID. And that will be useful later. And so instead of storing just a name and category row on top of the array, this is actually a row right now. So we actually need to get the column that we want, which is category ID. Or actually, sorry, name. It's just name. See that, verify that that works. It still does work, and it was saved, so we'll continue. Don't need that open. don't need that open, and don't need this open. So we can also echo category ID, just to make sure that we're actually getting the category ID. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, so there's 16 categories, but we are not going to use that right now. So actually this will be called category ID, and it'll be the number 1. And we want to make our where clause where the film category dot category ID equals the variable category ID. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so we got a whole bunch of stuff. So much stuff. We don't want to display all this at once. The person's brain will explode. Whoever's viewing this wouldn't be able to handle it. So maybe we'll only select a few things. Let's select the title. Film ID is something we need as well. Description, we'll save that for later. Actually, let's not do that. Let's get it. We'll do something interesting with it, I guess. And we'll also get the rating. Okay, and we'll double check, make sure we don't want anything else. Let's execute it, make sure it still works. So you need to say what the name of the table you want to get the column from, and they're all film. You want to get film from all of them. Okay, so that looks like it's working to me. Alright, so we'll come back here. So we need to make another statement. Now the whole reason that I'm running this query and finishing it completely and using this array and stuff is because you can't have multiple statements running at the same time. You can only have one statement running at the same time when you're doing MySQL. So I had to completely finish this query before I could do any other queries. So it's kind of annoying, but it's what you have to do, and you kind of get used to it once you start doing it. So first thing we need to do is bind PHP to MySQL variables. Okay, so we're going to make a statement using the database connection, and we're going to use this statement right here, the first statement. And instead of number 1, we'll have a question mark so that we can bind, so that we have the opportunity to bind. Statement, we're going to bind to the statement. A parameter, I'm going to bind to this statement. An integer, and the integer will be category ID, and category ID is the row that we got earlier. It's category ID. So the variable CID contains the category ID of whatever the ith row is. We're going to use that, and we're going to bind that variable to the MySQL variable. So that's the first question mark. That's the first variable that we're binding. It's the only variable we're binding. It's the only question mark. So it replaces this question mark with this value, and we're essentially binding this MySQL variable to this PHP variable. Just like we're setting this to number 1, we're just setting this to our PHP variable, which is a category ID. Now we execute the statement, and then we close the statement, so that we could do other queries. Then we get the table from here. So we set up the variable. Now let's use it. MySQL query the database. Do some formatting. That gives you a table, if there is a table. While there is a row that we fetched from this table, now probably a good idea that you don't select everything. You only select the first few. And when you're deciding what to select, you should take into consideration how big this is and how big you want to make everything else. So let's get 10. We'll only get 10. So in order to only get a certain amount, you have to add limit 10. So I'll do that here so it's easier to see. Limit 10. Execute. And there's only going to be 10 here at most. Okay. Come back here and we're going to echo. Now we're going to assume that sometime in the future we're going to have images, but we don't right now. The width of the image, we're going to make it 40. And it's going to have 10 margin on the left and the right, which will make it 60 wide. And we're going to have 10 images in one row, which will make it 600 wide. And 600 is how much width we have to spare. And if that doesn't work out, we'll take a second look at it. The height will be automatic. The alt. We're going to echo on a different line, semicolon, give that. So we're going to echo, so the alt is the text that's displayed when the image doesn't load, and the image is never going to load, so we're just going to put the title of the movie. The title we get from the row. See how this is looking so far. Okay, so we have, let's view the source, and okay, so we're definitely getting a bunch of images with 40. Well, technically, since there is no actual image we're loading, we do have to set the height. So that's why you don't really see it. Now you do. Still don't see the text, so let's get out the calculator. And we have 600. I wanted to do 10, but I guess we could do 6, make them 100 by 100, or 80 by 80, so double the size. And of course we need to decrease this to 6. And then we'll add the margin in, of course. I really want to see that alt. We'll probably have to do href equals hash. See what that does. Okay. We'll get back to that. We also want to have a title. title is the description. We'll refresh it so that when you hover over, well, let's see if it works first. To the page source, look for a title. Maybe if the image tag was actually working, it would show a title, but we'll get back to that. What else are we getting? The rating. So instead of using the image tag, let's just use a div. And get rid of this href. And instead of setting the height, just don't set the height. Don't set the width, and just make the class movie. And for the CSS, anything with the class movie will have a width 80 pixels. The margin 10 pixels on all sides. Wow, that's definitely not correct. So that's because I'm doing stuff wrong. So there is no such thing as an alt for div tag. Still need the title, which will be description. And we'll echo the title here. And dot movie class is movie. 80 pixels. Width is spelled wrong. And you're also going to have to do float left. Okay. And 5, 6, and the title will have to do a clear both. So it looks like I'm not really good at my math. So let's do a margin right of 20 pixels. See how that looks. $10. I don't like that either. Let's make it 100 with no margin. Now, it's not exactly 100 is correct because there's padding and stuff, so but it's also, when you do this, it's like layering, so instead of getting 6, let's get 5. And instead of 100, it'll be or instead of 90, let's make it 110. Okay, it's a lot better. I know I did a lot, but this file will be available on the under this video. So it gets cut off at the end here. We need to actually alter our, that's because of this annoying float left. And we'll have this have a class of spacing. So this is after every page. So now it's fixed. And I actually feel like there should be spacing like all over the place. So I'm gonna experiment with some spacing options and see how they look. So after we print every row in the table, we'll turn off PHP for a second, turn it back on. And while PHP is off, we're going to make a div in HTML and give that a class of spacing. You could have echoed it, but I didn't really want to. Also, before you start printing out the table, turn off PHP for a second. And we'll print the spacing before. Okay. And it's okay that these words are overlapping. Like I said, this is like, these would be images, but they're not images right now. Also, inside of every div, every single one of these divs, you want to echo another div. And this will be a div that has the rating. That's pretty sure that's what it's called. Let's take a look. Okay, so we have the rating now. Okay. And we're going to give that div a class of rating. Which won't change anything really. And these titles, we should wrap it in a anchor tag. And the href of the anchor tag will be just something we're going to essentially make up, film.php id equals echo the film ID. So if you hover over this, it'll say 22 is Amistad. This is 19. So if we look in our, it's actually, I'm looking down here, I can't do both things at once. It says 19 right now, so if we look in our database and we look at film number 19, that's Amadeus Holy. This is Amadeus Holy, so it's working. And if we click on it, it takes us to PHP, film.php question ID equals 19. That'll be important later, but right now I'm not going to go into it. So this is a listing of all the movies. I'll do a better job of, the next video will do more styling. It'll look a lot better than this. I'm Logan Murphy, and I'll see you next time.